Okay, I'm gonna mention something right now that my husband told me not to tell you guys. And most important thing that you guys need to take away from this is needless to say, there has been a lot going on in our lives at the moment. You probably all already know that we have just moved, so we're still in reno mode. However, we actually originally bought this property as an investment property 4 years ago. So, really exciting news. We actually just invested in our second investment property here in Germany. The first one we actually moved into, but we do still have a commercial property on the ground floor. So there is still money coming in, which is great, and it also helps us be able to pay off our own mortgage. Germany is quite an attractive market. A significant amount of Germans choose to rent. Many of you might already know this. Things have changed a little bit since COVID, and I think a lot of people decide that they want to have their forever home. However, that is also because rental prices used to be so low that it almost didn't make sense to purchase a property. So now it's starting to make a lot more sense to invest in your own property or to invest in an investment property that you're going to be renting out. So I'm basically going to explain this in 5 different stages, and that is the actually finding a smart property, the financing of that property, how to actually contact that property in the right way, the property handover, and then of course at the end, all of the payments that you're gonna have to consider when you're investing in a property. So the first step is actually finding a property that is a smart investment choice. There are multiple ways that you can find properties. My husband and I really love, of course, eBay Kleinanzeigen. We also really like Immo Scout. And our third option, which is kind of like our Geheimtipp, because not everybody knows about this, but that is the Zwangsversteigerung. So this is actually an auction of houses, of property here in Germany. I would say between the 3, the Zwangsversteigerung or the auction, you're going to have the best bet at getting a property that is probably renovierungsbedürftig, which means you're going to have to really renovate it, but you're really usually going to get the best bang for your buck in this case. So the first thing you're going to have to think of when you're investing in real estate here in Germany is if you want to purchase a house or just an apartment. So Eigentumswohnung or an apartment would be part of the Wohnungseigentumgemeinschaft, which means you're also going to be paying monthly, if not annual fees to maintain the actual building itself. I would say as an investment property, if you're looking to rent it out, makes probably more sense to actually buy the entire property on your own or to buy an entire house. Another good thing to mention is in Germany, location is really everything. One last thing that I will mention, and that is super important to consider, is this Bodengrundwert, or I'm not sure the actual terminology in German, but the actual value of the land that the property stands on. There is a website in Germany called Boris, and I will actually link that down below for you guys to check out. But basically you can put in an address and figure out exactly what the land itself is worth that the house stands on. So a good rule of thumb, if the property being sold is being sold at ground value, well then you've probably got yourself a really good deal. So your next step would be financing. There are a number of ways to find a bank that will offer you a mortgage here in Germany. You can actually compare your options online. There are multiple sites. I will link some down below for you to check out. Typically, you're looking at a down payment of about 10 to 20% of the actual worth of the sale. You should also be prepared that the bank might actually also do an audit on that house, whether they're just doing it online to check the worth of the land that the property stands on itself, or they want to actually come and see the property themselves. This could always take place. And your mortgage typically lasts between 10 and 15 years. It could be a little bit longer. It's not usually less than 10 years, but it's just, of course, who's to say? This part can typically be rather overwhelming, and that's because there's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of things you need to consider. There are a lot of things that you're gonna have to pay for. I will go into detail about this, but you're gonna have to pay land tax, you're gonna have to pay to be entered in the Grundbuch, you're gonna have to pay the real estate agent. There are a lot of fees that you're gonna have to pay. So you need to kind of do the math and figure it all out. Does this purchase make sense? This is a perfect time to actually mention our sponsor of today's post, and that is Lendlord. So if you're planning on being a landlord, or simply if you just want to see if the purchase of a property makes sense here in Germany, Lendlord is the place to go. They have a desktop, they also have a mobile version of Lendlord, and they offer a really cool platform that was originally based in the UK, and now they've launched their beta version here in Germany. So right now, I just want to take you over to their deal analyzer to make you understand how simple it is to really plug in each metric and each number to make sure that the property you would like to invest in is actually a smart choice. Welcome to the Lendlord platform. There are a number of things that Lendlord actually offers. I'm just going to take you through their deal analyzer because this is one of my favorite aspects to their website, but they are actually going to be offering a number of other exciting features soon. For example, I mentioned that you should actually check the worth of the property itself, and they actually have this in their UK version. They will be adopting it in their German version as well. So this is something that you're just going to have to actually type in an address. Let's say maybe like Kirchfeldstraße, which is my old street in Düsseldorf. And then what will actually happen is that they can actually estimate the worth of a certain property in a certain area. So this section is going to be what's going to be updated once you fill in all of your information. So let's say we wanted to purchase a house on Kirchfeldstraße for 350,000. That would be a great deal right now. The actual value of the property, perhaps it's a bit more, maybe you got a discount on it, or maybe you had to pay over purchase property value, but we'll just say it's the same right here. If it's a rental property, of course, this is where it's going to make the biggest difference on our return on investment. So let's say we have 4 apartments, and in those 4 apartments, we are going to be making maybe 3,500 in monthly rent. There is also going to be your land transfer tax. This you have to figure out on your own right now in Germany, but Lendlord is going to be updating this so you can actually drop down, select which region you're living in and how much transfer tax you do have to pay. In our case in NRW, I believe it's around 6.5% now, and this in German is called your Grunderwerbsteuer. So in case you're wondering, it's either land transfer tax or Grunderwerbsteuer here in Germany. If there are any refurbishing or renovation costs that you want to do, for example, I don't know, maybe we decide we want to paint all of the apartments before everyone moves in, and that's going to cost us 5,000. Closing costs, you can actually just go ahead, click on advance. It'll give you all of the information of what the closing costs actually include. So any legal fees would be, for example, the notary, maybe he charges 2,000, I'm not sure. If you did any inspection costs or any other closing costs that you might want to include. Here is your cash investment. So that's your down payment, how much you want to put in to the house initially. As I mentioned, you're probably going to be making a down payment of about 10 to 20%. So let's say 20%, that means we would need to have 75,950 euros in the bank before we make that purchase. And then we've also got all of our loan details here. So when we're getting the mortgage and we know exactly the terms of our mortgage, we can then go and punch it in here. So LTV is actually your loan to value ratio. So for example, say the house was actually 350 euros, but you already had a down payment of 75,000 euros, well then you would require less of a loan. But perhaps you're also taking into account that you're also going to need maybe a little bit more for your refurbishing costs or for your renovation costs, perhaps more than 5,000. This is where you will change that here. Let's just say we got 90% of our loan that we required. So that would be 315,000. Because our cash investment was 20%, the deposit on the loan is going to be 13%, so 46,200. And then maybe the mortgage term is 30 years. Let's change that to 15 because as I mentioned, it's typically on average somewhere between 10 to 15 years with a fixed interest rate. If your mortgage term is longer, you might actually not have a fixed interest rate, so that's something to also consider. And of course, this is going to be the final step where you include your mortgage rate. Maybe it's at 2.5. I think our first house, we got a really good rate. It was under 1%, but let's just say 1.5%. And only only on the interest. So our monthly payment will be 380 euros. And if you have any additional mortgage fees, like, I don't know, if they are hiring a notary or what have you, then you can also put those fees into there. You have a larger section here as well that you can also put in information about if you know this already. So any utility costs that you have. If you've decided to hire a property manager, maybe they charge you a certain percentage of your monthly rental income. If you're paying for any landlord insurance, or if you need any monthly maintenance costs, you can just go ahead and punch all of that information in right there. This is what you're going to be wanting to look at right away. And this is, of course, your annual cash flow, so what's going to be coming in, and your initial return on investment. From here, you can actually go and you can click Prospect Report. This is going to give you all the information you need on this particular property. You can add and delete as many properties as you want. You can actually have just prospects, or you can actually add your own properties here in your dashboard, as well as add any tenant information that you have, any transactions that you make, etc. So here is going to be something you can actually export. You can print it out. You can bring it to the bank, really. Like, this really helps you kind of understand your costs. It also helps the bank understand your costs. So everything you need, absolutely everything, is going to be found here. I would recommend Lendlord, again, not just for people who are looking at being landlords, but also for people who want to make a smart investment decision, even if it's a property that you're planning on buying and owning yourself. So I hope that this really helps in regards to financing. I really haven't found anything like it on the web yet, so I would strongly advise you to go and check this out. It is free, so you don't have to pay at all, and having this is going to ensure that everything makes a lot more sense for you when you are making an official offer on a property here in Germany. So now that we have a better understanding of our financing and whether or not this property makes sense, we're going to jump into actually contacting the property and then the whole handover of the property itself. I am going to tell you a number of things that I've learned along the way and mistakes that I don't want you to make as well. So make sure you stay until the end, because these tips are very, very, very important. So financing might seem tricky, but actually contacting the property can be a little bit tricky as well. This is because in Germany, the market is getting tougher. You know, like I said, there's more competition, which means you need to be persistent. It is very, very key to show up with a statement from the bank that says you can actually afford this property and you do have the financing to buy this property right away. This is going to be the number one thing that sets you apart from other people, because it shows them that you're serious about the purchase and that this sale is going to close very, very quickly. Okay, I'm going to mention something right now that my husband told me not to tell you guys, and that's simply because it's not legal. It's not legal, and I'm not saying that you guys should do it. I just want to explain to you here, and I think it is really important to tell you guys this, that there might be certain situations where you don't get a house and you're like, I don't understand, you know, I did everything Jenna just told me to. I showed up with all the right documents. I made the highest bid, you know, I just don't get it. Why did I not get the property? Please don't quote me on this. I know I'm not supposed to be saying this. However, the fact of the matter is, politics matter, people can be dirty, and there are other underlying factors that you might not necessarily be aware of. Sometimes when people are purchasing a property, they offer some cash under the table. Again, I'm not saying you should do this, it's just shit happens, guys. I mean, this happens sometimes, and this might be why you didn't get the property and somebody else did. I'm not saying it will always happen, but it could happen. Of course, I mentioned politics too. You know, it could be based on who they know. They might be able to give the real estate agent another house that they can sell afterwards. There is a lot on the table, or I should say under the table, that we don't necessarily always know about. So the next stage would be the property handover. The steps that you need to take are actually very, very simple. First, you are going to take the Kaufvertrag, or the sales document, you know, the contract, and you are going to take that to a lawyer. Step 2 is that you are going to head to the bank. The one that you decide to go with is the one you are going to set up a meeting with. You are going to sign a contract with and say, yes, I would like to take my mortgage out with this bank at this interest rate. So as the buyer, you actually have the legal right to choose the notary, or the Notar in German, yourself. So you can actually call them, you can make an appointment. Typically, it doesn't take that long. And this brings me to our last section, which is payments. This is the stage where all of the invoices are going to start coming in. First, you are going to have to pay the makler or the real estate agent who was involved. Usually the makler fee is somewhere between 2% and 7%. It can differ based on the region. Of course, you are also going to have to pay the notar or the notary. You are also going to have to pay the land transfer tax, which comes from the Finanzamt, so the tax office. The bank is going to be the one responsible to pay the seller in full. And then of course, the last payment is that you are going to have to pay the Amtsgericht, the actual fee that it costs to get your name put in this Grundbuch, or the ownership of the actual property itself. There are a few things that I've learned. For example, Erbpacht. So this is basically when the land your property is on is actually not owned by you. The situation could also be that somebody in that house has this lebenslange Wohnrecht, so that the seller or somebody in the house can live in your property for the rest of their life, whether it's for free or whether they have to pay rent. Another good thing to note is that when you go in and look at a house, the seller actually only has a legal right to let you know about the issues that cannot be seen from the naked eye. Something that I find really interesting is also the year of the build. I would say that houses typically built in the 50s or 60s are usually built a little thinner. And the last and most important thing that you guys need to take away from this is, if you are investing in a property that you intend to rent out or to resell, well, you need to know that if you're not actually living in that property yourself, you can actually not resell it for 10 years unless you want to pay 50% taxes on the money gained from the sale of the house. In the case that you are living in the property, the rule has always been that you need to live in that property for 3 years before you can resell it and not pay tax on the money gained or the money won from the resale of the house. I wish you guys the best of luck. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask me in the comment section below. You can send me an email, you can write me on Instagram, whatever you want. I really hope that this helped you guys, and please do not let this video discourage you. I want this to actually encourage you to make these investments here in Germany and to be financially independent here. If you want any more tips, I also did an interview with my personal financial advisor that I will link up above here for you guys, so you can check that out too as well. So that's it for me today. Vielen lieben Dank und wie immer, bis später.